What's up? What's up? What's up? Members of the Conscious Approach Tribe, thanks for joining in. My name is JV Wins, Dogon SS. We are here as always, here to kick the shit with you, light the tires, and have some good old fun here on this Tuesday evening, November the 14th. Thank you for joining us.
You.
Boys, a big old solid. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the commentary in this or any other video. We certainly appreciate it. And as always, we appreciate all of the folks out there who have been checking out our videos. We certainly do appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much. We appreciate the support as we continue to move onward and upward here in our little corner of the internet here. So thank you very much. And with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. First thing that we are going to talk about on today's stream is comments made by Fat Joe. Fat Joe recently sat down with actor Chazz Palminteri. Now, I know this guy from movies from back in the day, like Bronx Tale. He's been in a bunch of stuff, but the first thing I remember seeing him in is Bronx Tale. He played the mobster that the kid was trying to get on with, and Robert De Niro was the dad trying to keep his kid out of the mob life and so on and so forth. But he's been in a lot of movies. He's like an OG actor in the Hollywood game, Chazz Palminteri. Apparently he has a podcast, because who doesn't have a podcast these days?
Exactly.
Fat Joe was on the podcast with Chazz Palminteri, and they were talking about hip hop, and they were talking about Fat Joe's past and his history. And Palminteri asked Fat Joe an interesting question. He asked him if you have to be from the hood in order to be a real rapper. Air quotes around the word real, whatever the word real means. Chazz Palminteri was essentially asking, do you have to be a street dude? Do you have to be from the hood in order to qualify as a rapper, in order to be someone that people should pay attention to when it comes to the rap game? So interesting thoughts on this, to be sure. But first, as always, for context purposes, we will play a brief clip of what Fat Joe had to say, and then we will talk about this situation once the clip has concluded.
You.
You think Joe is a real rapper has to grow up in the hood to be a real rapper?
I wouldn't say that 2023.
Right.
Because, there's so many different forms of hip hop, so many different.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
But when we first came out,
I think that's a good point.
And it's unfair to rappers that are successful, kids, because rappers that are successful have a following that follow them and say, man, we know Joey. So now you get a kid of a celebrity, of a hip hop star,
Right.
and they grew up in
Listening to you and
the Little House on the Prairie, though.
Got it.
And so the hood is like, nah, you grew up rich. We don't want to hear your story. You grew up rich.
Right.
So it's very unfortunate for like artists who have talented kids who want to become artists, because the people in the streets are like, nah, they didn't grow up like they dad. They dad, 50 Cent got shot 9 times. Snoop Doggy Dogg beat a murder case. I mean, this is not stuff that should be glorified.
Right,
but this was the stuff
right.
that this was the credentials that you needed to be considered authentic and real back in the days. And now I think a lot less. I think now it's all right. It's all right to grow up, middle class. It's all right to grow up with a mother and father and make hip hop music.
Yeah, I hope so.
I doubt it.
I would also say that it's all right to grow up with a mother and father. Who knew? Such a novel concept. What do you make of what Fat Joe had to say there? Rappers need to be real by, rappers being real by coming from the streets, but nowadays not so much.
Well, I like to just start off by saying that, there's this thing where, we would like to point out that hip hop is only articulating the conditions that the people are in, and they're only talking about what they're seeing and all this other stuff. And my rebuttal to that is no, they're not. And I would say that probably, out of all of this, gutter rap, all this tough stuff, these guys aren't actually, well, now they are, but back then they weren't actively murdering people. They weren't selling bricks of cocaine. So there was a lot of embellishment going on with these hood tales. And so they weren't so much so reflecting what they were seeing. They were given fantasies about crime. And but of course, so I just wanted to address that,
Yeah.
because there's going to be, oh, they're just are, just reflecting. No, they were embellishing. And so when it comes to the street cred thing, I mean, I agree. It comes with that what hip hop turned into, which was rap. It turned into rap, and rappers, should be from the streets basically, because, well, the term rap, basically came about, and turned, hip hop turned into rap. And so hip hop artists turned into rappers. And so with the turn of rappers being rappers, well, that whole thing was just about glorifying, street life. So it came with this thing where if the genre became synonymous with glorifying street rap, well, then you have to be from that background in order to talk about so there had to be that level of authenticity first. So, but which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you have to be from the streets in order to make rap songs, or did hip hop change into this corporate, cash cow? And then in order to make it, you had to talk about crime. Well, I would say that hip hop turned into a corporate cash cow that in order to air quote make it, you had to talk about crime. And who better to talk about crime of people that actually came from that background? So unfortunately, that's what the genre turned into. And then there were these people who were either could talk that talk. They knew enough of that lifestyle so they can articulate it in a certain way. They had certain verbiage and vernacular that they can use in order to say that, hey, I'm from the streets, because you don't know about these ounces and these scales or none of this stuff unless you actually been around it. So they had that level of cachet to them, but they still weren't the kingpins that they claim to be. They weren't the murderers that they claim to be. And this is from our generation.
Mm-hmm.
So it became this stage act of acting like you're hood, you're tough, you're a prisoner, all of this stuff. But in actuality, these people were actually raising well-to-do kids, and at least trying their best, putting them in the best schools, all that jazz, while they're telling other people's kids to go shoot up a place because somebody stepped on your shoe. So for him to turn around and say that, oh, it's hard for these rappers who end up having kids and they want to rap and stuff like that, and people go, well, you're not nothing like your father. The father wasn't even like that.
Yeah.
The father wasn't even like that. So if he was, he'd be in prison right now, like these new rappers that are really about this dumb life, and they are actually catching RICO acts. I can't name one rapper from our generation that caught a RICO. It's not that they were so smart that they evaded the law. They were just artists. They were commercialized figureheads that never really did any of these things. And if they did, it was on a very small scale that your neighborhood dope dealer did. But it wasn't bricks in the trunk going across the interstate. They weren't doing that. So I say all that to say is that Joe does have a point to a degree. It is sad. It is unfortunate that, that became synonymous with just the art form. But be that as it may, I don't think that this was something that the people per se wanted. I think this was more of social engineering, and then the people having an appetite for MSG, GMO foods, and stuff like that. So whenever they taste the real thing or hear the real thing, organic rhymes, they immediately get turned off because, well, I don't like vegetables. I don't like apples, so give me the apple croissant. Give me the bacon and cheese biscuit with extra honey and all of this other stuff, because that's what their palate has been trained to absorb. So how do you feel about this, man? Do you feel as though that you have to be hood in order to make it in a rap game, or is that more of an old trivial concept?
Yeah, that's a completely ridiculous notion. Yeah, you raise a good point with these figurehead.
Mhm.
Ironically, one of 50 Cent's shows, which reinforces all of these tropes, all of those 50 Cent shows on Stars, those
Yep.
power shows,
Yep.
reinforce all of these tropes.
Yep.
But ironically, um, the Raising Canaan show during the first season, there's a character on there called Famous, Puerto Rican character, and he's trying to be a rapper in the rap game. And he's rapping about bricks and shooting people and all of this. And 50 Cent is narrating the episode. And he's talking about how this is what happens in the rap game when you have these people who become sort of enamored with being an artist. And so, in order to try and get into the rap game, they capitulate to the cultural infrastructure of it and they
Right.
start parroting the speech. And that's how you get these studio thugs,
Right.
these individuals who never lived a life, but think that that's what you have to do in order to be successful. And so they become these rappers rapping about, murder, death, kill, drugs, violence, jail, prison, and all of this other stuff. So I completely hear you on that aspect of it. This the comments about Fat Joe reminded me of the N word. To be honest with you, that was the first thing that I thought of,
Mm.
and here's the reason why. I correlate the two notions. So I correlate the idea of being hood or street and being authentic with using the N word, and a little. So I personally have trained myself to eliminate the use of the word from my vocabulary.
Good job.
I don't tell anybody else to do it. It's not that thing with me. I'm not going to die by that. So other people still use it with me. I'm not going to be like, hey, I don't use that word. Don't use it around me. It's not that serious. So I don't care to that level where I'm going to check somebody on it. But I personally have stopped using it for the most part. It still slips out every now and again, but for the most part, I've stopped using it. And the reason why is because the current application of the word has become far too confusing for me to continue to feel comfortable enough to just use the word in any situation. So I've just said, in order to not contribute to this confusion, I'm just going to stop using the word altogether because I feel as though continuing to use the word contributes to the confusion around the word's application. And the reason why the word has become so confusing is because that word has been packaged with hip hop as a product and it's sold to everybody. So, like, there's no label on rap music or a hip hop album or anything hip hop related that says for black people only. There's no disclaimer that says if you are not black, you cannot listen to this music. So when these artists perform these shows and they're at these festivals or they go to these concert venues or just at large, Drake or anybody else who's huge on Spotify and Apple Music, the majority of the people consuming this stuff are people who aren't black. By the numbers, it's mostly non-black people who are consuming this content. And the word is laced all throughout the music. So you're actively telling people to participate in a culture. Well, you're actively telling people that it's okay to endorse it, to spend money on it, but then you want to check them whenever they actively participate in it when they use the word. To me, that's confusion. I analogize that with sports. It would confuse me if the NBA told me that I can pay to go to a game, but that I can't actually play basketball. That would be confused. I wouldn't understand that. So you mean to tell me that I can buy all your products and buy all your jerseys and spend $5,000 on season tickets and go to the game? But if I were to actually buy a basketball and try to play, like the NBA police are going to show up out of the woodwork and check me on playing basketball. Well, if I can spend my money on this thing, I should also be able to participate in it. And because the N word has become a part of the package, the business of the consumption of hip hop, and you're selling it to everybody, not just black people, not just brown people, not just poor people, it's being sold to everybody. You can't then turn around and tell those individuals they can't use certain words that's in the music. That is, in effect, your way of telling somebody that they can spend money on something but not actively participate. That's weird. And the reason why this has become such a confusion is because the music has become commercialized. So this studio hood street thug stuff has been turned into a product that is bartered and sold to people worldwide.
Mhm.
So if we are going to uh if we are going to admit or all agree hip hop is no longer a subgenre, rap is no longer a subgenre, it's a major genre. It is consumed by everyone. Then we at that point must also admit that you don't have to relegate yourself to a singular notion within the genre that historically is what you had to cop to in order to be successful. It's now free reign. So if you're a suburban kid, if you're a middle class kid, if you're an affluent kid, the example that Fat Joe used was children of hip hop people who, of course, grew up well to do and did not grow up like their parents. Like this thing is a commercialized product. Therefore, if you come from any sort of background, whether it's street hood or whether it's affluent, middle class, upper middle class, it doesn't matter. There's no barrier to entry for it, and there's no barrier on the circumstances that surround your individual past that would inhibit you from being a part of it. So you should just let everybody in, and we shouldn't still be dealing with these weirdo unwritten rules, like Major League Baseball with their unwritten rules that are just weird. Who cares? No, you don't have to be street. No, you don't have to be hood. And the fact that people still cling to this is a part of what allows for a lot of the tropes and low hanging fruits associated with this music to continue to persist. None of this stuff should matter anymore. So, if we want everything to be more clear, less confusing, if you want people like me to stop preaching about why I don't use the N word anymore, then let's let some of that stuff go because it really is silly and arbitrary. It's kind of antiquated. Y'all created this by selling it as a product to everybody in the first place. So these are parts of the fruits of that labor. You reap what you sow. You've opened the floodgates and let everybody in. So let everybody have at it. And if somebody wants to be a rapper, despite the fact that they ain't come from the hood or they didn't come from the street, they're just as real as the street rappers are. Because this is not about articulating a lifestyle anymore. It is just about propagating a business and about, you know, being a business out of this music that you call an art. And that's pretty much where it stands.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would also say that people, as I mentioned earlier, people have been trained on this appetite of savagery. And, dating back as far as I can remember, the envelope was constantly getting pushed in music and hip hop. And, being more reckless, because when NWA came out, it was a shock on how they were using the N-word, how they were talking about killing other black guys, how they were talking about, the police and all these other things, just how the vulgarity of it. Luke too, by the way, with the envelope that Luke was pushing with his raunchy rap and all that other stuff. And when the envelope has been pushed, every year, if you will, everybody's always trying to say the most outlandish thing, the most, crazy thing or whatever. So as I mentioned, all the embellishment and all that stuff that came with, gangster rap or whatever you want to call it, in our generation, that's when trap rap and all that other stuff really grew and took off because of how cutting edge, about how much of the envelope is getting pushed on how you're talking openly on a microphone, how you sell drugs. It's just the concept was just mind blowing of like, can you even really say this? You're doing this and getting away with this? Like, this is wild. And it's just a mindset of constantly pushing it. That's why when Future is what he is now to today's generation, is because his music is intentionally savage. It's constantly pushing the envelope on how much drugs one can consume, how savage they can be towards women, how matter of fact they are about making money, all this other stuff. and all that envelope pushing, all that envelope pushing. So then we get the new stuff with the sexy reds and stuff that we keep talking about. They're pushing the envelope on box rap, on how hard they're thoughting in these streets. It's constantly an envelope being pushed, less to the imagination, more to direct savage. Hey, because back in the day, somebody could have talked about, po pimping or whatever, and they talking about the hoes they got on a stroll, but this girl's talking about her booty holes brown. So they're leaving nothing to the imagination. It's straight to the savagery. And so people have grown an appetite, and it's become synonymous with hip hop of, hey man, how are you pushing the envelope now? How are you going to push the envelope? So if there's a rapper that comes out and they actually are trying to deliver a message, they're not doing this savage rap. They're not doing it. They're deemed boring, lame, or XYZ or whatever. No, that's still going on. And that I was surprised to see the young people pick this up and still run with it. But now the new thing for the males, at least, is like depression rap. How depressed are you? How many people you can't trust? How the people that you trust, how close were they to you? Was it your brother, your homeboy? Who did you dirty, bro? They stole your girl. This is crazy. The envelope's always there. So depression rap has its own envelopes. How many drugs are you popping, man, because you're so depressed? So with all of this stuff being said, my thing is that this appetite came from somewhere. And so the only thing that these new rappers are doing are just following the rubric. They're following the model. And so to me, I push all of this stuff back to when all the major labels got so involved with the art of hip hop. And once we see when the labels actually got involved, then we see the types of music coming from these labels change. And then from there, when it's being massively produced, as you mentioned, being a commodity, yes, though, people from other communities financially consume it, but we, culturally consume it. So much so, as you mentioned before, that, people are Black culture and hip hop are synonymous. People think that hip hop is what their life's supposed to be. And it's like, nah, bro, it's just a music form. What you gonna say?
Yeah.
No,
I was agreeing. It's just entertainment.
Yeah, it's just entertainment. Yeah. So, with all that being said, I just feel as though this is not something that happened yesterday. This is something that's been going on for almost the last 30 years. And what we're seeing here are the fruits, of that tree that got produced in the late 80s, early 90s, of major corporations getting involved with the art form, telling the artists and telling us, the listeners, what we actually want to listen to. Now everybody's got Stockholmed into it, and now they can't wait for the next Savage record from Future. And I think that this is just where we're at right now. And I think conversations like this, amongst people who've had enough, these are the only things that's going to keep the culture actually in a state of, something being normal or not completely off the deep end. But the young generation, they're too young to understand. But for us, the people that saw, pretty much hip hop in its truest form, from when we was young to what it is now, I think, we actually have the perspective to actually look back and say that, hey, man, there was like you can actually pinpoint a time to where, it became thug rap, if you will. So, yeah, I think the artists are just doing what they have to do, air quotes, to get on. And yeah, like you mentioned, that character from the show, they feel as though they have to go down that route. And there's a lot more brothers doing that than trying to stay solid. So it's sad, man. But right now, it's got the people in the chokehold, man. And they may not want to be the biggest, baddest thug, but they still have to be some level of tough. And I'm not seeing that going anywhere anytime soon. So,
I just, to me, this is about commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the company who, puts chemicals into the water supply, and then people start getting sick, but then the company wants to shirk responsibility for people getting sick. And it's like there's a such thing as corporate responsibility, You have to be you have to be responsible for the ramifications of your business practices and deal with what happens when there are adverse results to the decisions that you've made. And I think packaging hip hop, I keep conflating hip hop and rap, and to me they're different. I
Mhm.
think the decision to package rap as a product to sell to everybody, even people who cannot empathize with the lifestyle inherent in the music, was a strategic decision that has yielded unintended consequences. And one of those unintended consequences is confusion around culture and how seriously people are supposed to be taking this music and how you're supposed to be following it like gospel, excuse me, or lack thereof. And the thing about it is, this is the bed that you've made. And so we have to deal with this. And it's why I've always contended I'm not saying that it's right, but I have nevertheless contended it shouldn't be white people using the N word to me shouldn't be, it should be a non-issue at this point. And I genuinely feel that way. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear me say that, but I mean that because this is what you get when you package something and sell it as a cultural commodity to people in various communities. You are going to get the you are going to get the literal participation of said product because you can't separate someone's purchasing power from their penchant for practicing what they bought. If I buy a basketball, I'm going to take that basketball to a basketball court and I'm going to play the sport. If I buy this rap album, especially after 10, 15 years, I don't care what I don't care what my background is. I don't care what I look like. I don't care what my ethnic background is. I don't care if I'm white. I don't care. You are not going to tell me that it is okay for me to buy rap music for 10, 15 years and expect me to filter myself and not do things like use the N word or try to become a rapper, even if I'm middle class or upper class. No, you sold this thing to me. So I'm reserving the right to actively participate because you sold it to me. In no other area of corporate America or business do we see these kinds of things take place, except for when it comes to this rap music. And it's because there's so much confusion around it, given the cultural stratification behind who's participating and who's not, despite the fact that it is sold to everybody. So my thing has always been, you want to get rid of this confusion, stop caring about it. White people want to use the N word, oh well. And if you don't like that, put a disclaimer on the music, create a law that says white people can't listen to it. It's as simple as that. Because you want to sit around expecting white people to filter themselves and not use the word, but you still think that they're going to spend the money to go to Bonnaroo and South by Southwest and Rolling Loud, and they're going to up these streaming numbers and make people like Drake be the highest streamed artist on Spotify or in Spotify history. You think that that happens because it's only black people doing it? Of course not. And this isn't necessarily a racial issue per se. It's more of a economic issue. It's more of a socioeconomic issue. But it is what it is. So I just kind of feel like either you make this thing make sense or you just leave it as it is. And we need to stop with the fake outrage whenever you do have people from the middle class or the upper class who want to be rappers. Because if it's a product that's sold to everybody, this is one of those unintended consequences. You're just going to have to live with that. It is what it is. So I don't know whether that was where Fat Joe was coming from with this, but it's a part of it for sure. There's no point in getting upset. There's no point in thinking about who can and cannot use certain words. There is no longer a point in thinking about what your background should be in order to be considered quote unquote real. It doesn't matter. Those are completely antiquated notions because you sold it to everybody. It's not like you only sold it intentionally to quote unquote real people. So this is what you get. That's business. That is business, and this music is business. So these are the consequences that come along with doing business. It's the price of doing business, as they say. So you're just gonna have to let the chips fall where they may.
I agree, man. And shout out to Fat Joe and his tattoo beard. Shout out to Joe, man.
Hey, man, Terror Squad, man. Joe Crack. Joe Crack, another alleged studio thug.
But
Yeah, I mean, apparently he was selling those bricks of Yale. So
right. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, that it is. That's where it's at, man. Y'all need to stop getting mad at this stuff. And if you don't like it, stop buying the music. That's all I gotta say. Because it ain't gonna stop. So
Joey Crack.
yeah, good looking on the content, nevertheless. Joe Crack, hip hop OG, wise words of wisdom. Who knew?
Yeah, exactly.